Welcome to the Endgame series part 2. In this video, Leyou will be teaching rook checkmates. With two rooks, the endgame is simple. You can use the rolling rooks method. Move your rooks to the sides of the board, creating space between your rooks and the king. In this case, the rooks are already on the sides. In this endgame, the easiest way to checkmate your opponent is to bring the opponent's king to the end of the board. Utilizing the rook's vision, you can bring the opponent's king to the end of the board to deliver checkmate on the back row. For example, you can do Rook A4. This creates a force field or a box around the king, so the king has to move. King D5, Rook H5 check. By doing this, you're basically creating a force field for the king so that the king cannot escape this box. So if the king moves again, you just check again with the other rook. And if he plays King D7, this is where you have to think about stuff. So the king is attacking the rook, which means that if you just play Rook H7 check, you can just take your rook. So instead, you have to play Rook G6. This way, you're giving yourself the most distance from the king as possible. If he just moves his king, you just check, and then you complete the pattern. King D8, Rook G8, checkmate. With two rooks, you can checkmate without the king. But in this case, with one rook, it's harder than that. Instead, you have to rely on your king to guard these three squares so that the king cannot escape the box. In this case, the first move would be Rook A5 check. You're basically creating this box around the king. After King D6, you also move your king up to match their king. If they move their king, you play Rook D5, creating an even smaller box. This gives the king less room. After King B6, King D4, King C6, King C4, King B6, you can play Rook D6 check. If they go King A5, you can play this really beautiful waiting move, Rook C6. Then their only move is King A4, and then you can deliver checkmate. If they go King C7, you go King C5 to protect your rook and to create an even smaller box. After King B7, you check again. If they play King to A6, then you do the same beautiful waiting move, Rook C7. If he goes to King A5, then you can just checkmate. If he goes King C8, you go King C6, create an even smaller box. If it goes King B8, you go King B6 to match it. This is called opposition. It's when your king and their king are looking directly at each other. After King C8, you want to play Rook D6, which is a waiting move, causing the king to go to B8, which then you can checkmate on D8. So to recap, with two rooks, you can use the rolling rooks method, which is to just move your rooks up the board to checkmate the king on the back row. So Rook A4, King D5, and then here, the key moment. You don't want to lose your rook. So instead of playing Rook H7 to complete the pattern, you want to play Rook G6. This makes it so there's more distance between the king and the rooks. After King C7, Rook H7, King D8, Rook G8 checkmate, you win the game. And this is important. With two rooks, you don't need your king for checkmate. To recap on the one rook checkmate, you want to create this opposition or this force field around the kings so you can push the king to the side of the board. So you play Rook A5 check. If he moves, you want to move your king up as well. King C6, Rook D5, so you can create the smallest box possible. After King B6, you just want to move your king to match the other king. After King B6, you want to play Rook D6 check. If he goes here, remember, you have the waiting move and the checkmate. So here, and then here's checkmate. So if they move King C7, you just go King C5 to match their king, King B7, and then Rook D7 check. Again, if they go here, you have this beautiful waiting move. Now, if they go King C8, you match their king as well. They move their king, you move their king. And then here, if they move back, you want to play this waiting move, which is really good because then you can checkmate. After King B8, that's checkmate. So that's it. If you learned something from our video, be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a comment down below.